started. Um, I'm starting right at the beginning of chapter 4 in book 2, Chance and Necessity. In the middle of that, right after 196a, for they say nothing comes about from fortune, but that for everything, whatever that we say comes from chance or fortune, there is some definite cause. I'm going to skip ahead. For many, oh, I actually am not. For example, of coming by fortune into the marketplace and catching up with someone whom one wanted, but did not expect to find, the cause is wanting to go to use the marketplace. And similarly, with the rest of the things said to be from fortune, there is always something to take as the cause, but not fortune. Since if fortune were anything, it would seem strange, and truly so. And one might find it impossible to understand why in the world none of the ancient wise men, speaking about the causes of coming to be and passing away, demarcated anything about fortune, but as it seems, they too regarded nothing as being from fortune. But this too is to be wondered at. For many things both come For many things both come about and are from fortune and from chance, which everyone, though not ignorant that it is possible to refer each of them back to some cause of its coming about, which the earlier argument declared to be the abolition of fortune, nevertheless says are from fortune, some of them, though some are not. So I would say my big question here is, what do people understand is the difference between fortune and chance? And feel free to take us anywhere else to kind of answer that question. But really, for those of you that just showed up, we're looking at the very first page of chapter 4. And the question is, what is the difference between fortune and chance? Go for it, James Cook. Get us started.
I think later on he decides that fortune is something that can only happen to human beings. So so uh, so they're related, obviously. And chance, he's going to talk about the vortex and things like that. There's so much to think about here. You know, the whole idea of arbitrary arbitrariness and chance. What happens to a deck of cards? You know, when it's shuffled. Now you have over 2.5 billion different permutations of 5 cards that could fall out of that 52 card deck. That's an awful lot of different permutations of a poker hand. The same thing for DNA. Every time we have a child, you know, the DNA is shuffled through meiosis, and we don't there's kind of like an extremely wide range of possible children that we could have. So the idea of chance is so real and such a big part of life. And then there's the idea of, like, how does cause affect chance? Because chance, you know, causes in other words, if you've got a spinning vortex, you know, where does the stuff land? Where does the dust land that's coming out of the vortex, you know, to determine what the new landscape is going to look like? So how many rocks will the spreading tree root encounter to cause it to go in a different direction, you know, and so on and so forth. So the possibilities are endless, and I'd say he comes to the conclusion that I don't know. He does. We have a lot more insight into this mathematically than he did, and I think he comes to a much more conservative conclusion than we do today about the distributed possibilities of existence and chance. But he's kind of like he's on the trail. He's on the right path. So let's put it that way.
Thank you, James Cook. David?
Yeah, I have a feeling that when we talk about this, we mean something very specific. And clear today, and he's sorting through a box of issues that, haven't really been sorted out, apparently. I think this is like working out problems in daily speech as opposed to what we consider working out a philosophical problem of determinate material existence, which I think we have a much clearer idea of because we live hundreds of years into the Enlightenment, which is the clock paradigm of the universe was wound up and it's just ticking away. Everything is in a gear. It's all rolling. The rules are mathematical, physical rules. It can all be calculated out. And, we know what we can't predict because we know the exact probabilities of every possible occurrence. We have that worked to a T. So we have this, different ideas. To him, someone shows up in the market, oh, they owed you money, you get paid, that was an incidental. So he's sorting this out, what this means, that's chance, as opposed to what we mean. But I think he has a great insight, which is, what do you consider the thing that was happening and what it was going towards, and what was the trajectory and the ends? What was the meaning of like a person's action going to buy a fruit, and the other incidental things that happen along the way that are, he calls, incidental attributes. So he's making the essential attributes and the incidental attributes two different things. And the incidental attributes can be said to have happened by chance. Because, as James was saying, there are innumerable paths through the market and innumerable combinations of children, innumerable bouncings of the ball. But the ones that aren't part of the aim and the plan and the intention, the understanding of what the act was, yes, they're caused at a lower level, but you're not talking at that level. So the way you're talking, your Greek pal you're talking to, in that sense, this is an incidental event. So there is chance all the time in that sense.
Thank you, David. Peter?
I think that the difference between, I think that fortune is a species of chance. Chance is the bigger thing, and it can happen to things that are like, James Cook in the very beginning of his comment was, I think, right, that fortune is only applicable to humans, i.e. things that have an end or a telos. So and I want to correct something that David just said. He said when the marketplace was chance, but that's an example of fortune, not chance, because I went to the marketplace to buy a piece of fruit, but I have a lot of other agendas going on in my life. One of them was to get money from that deadbeat, whomever, right? That's one of those things. But the cause of me going to the market was to get the fruit. I just so happened to accidentally or incidentally run into, the deadbeat Fred, and so I extracted money from him. That was by fortune because I had a goal, and fortune is the incidental achieving of a goal that I had.
Yeah,
I did not go to the market.
Sorry, Peter, just to give you textual evidence for that, on 61, it says at the bottom of 197A, fortune is an incidental cause among things proceeding from choice, which in turn are among those for the sake of something. The for the sake of something being the goal, and then the choice being I'm going into the market. Yeah, so just to give you textual support.
Right. So, and he's going to contrast both chance and fortune with things that happen for the most part, which is going to be like life, and things that happen always, which is going to be the law-like things, things that never vary.
So going off of that, then I was very curious about something he said. I don't know, David, if you want to respond to that, but if not, then right above 160 on page 60 in the stacks, it says, for they are saying.
Did you mute yourself?
Garth, we can't hear you. It's the same thing that happened last time. Every time you bow down, your voice disappears.
Yeah, I was saying, David, I don't know if you want to respond to what Peter and I were just saying. If not, there was something I wanted to take us to on the page prior.
I'm going to ask a question. Maybe also, I'm reading a different translation, and the beginning of 4 says, but chance and spontaneity are reckoned among causes. Do you have fortune in there? Because fortune comes up later.
Fortune and chance is what we get at the beginning of chapter 4.
Fortune and chance, and this says chance also and spontaneity. I wonder which one means which.
That's a good question.
Yeah, maybe the chance is fortune, because well, I don't know. That's a good one.
It
Well,
comes
later
later.
down,
Yeah, it comes up
And
later.
David, like I said in the, I don't know if you're interested, but I said this in the first meetup, I think that I have an actual PDF of this. If you want it, I can email it to you.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, just send me a message on Meetup with your email, and then I can email you the sacks because I didn't want to post it on the Meetup page because I think like all the thousands of people that were posting them is kind of the reason probably why Z Library went.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's an interesting what the spontaneity and chance are there. I don't know if anyone has access to the Greek that would know enough. Is that what Peter's doing? That would know enough what either one is.
this one says luck and chance.
Even better.
But what does he use? What word does he use when he talks about going to the marketplace? Because in our translation it says fortune going to the marketplace.
I mean, the second sentence says, we must inquire, therefore, in what matter chance and spontaneity are present among the causes enumerated. What's your second sentence in number 4?
Well, it's just going to use the same things. I think it's distinguishing when he goes down to the marketplace, because then he uses fortune for that rather than.
Can you tell us what part that's at?
Yeah, I'll get a pencil.
Like, does it say like 196A or 10?
Mhm.
Where's my pencil?
I remember the
196A,
marketplace.
8 or 10
What?
or something like that.
Say it again.
196A 8 maybe
Okay, 196A 8.
ish.
Did you hear that, David?
196, and I have sub numberings from 1 to 35.
So 8.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. Oh, 196, not
No,
196.
so yeah, 196. Well, it says someone's coming into the marketplace. Why do they go to the marketplace? By luck or chance? Or, but I mean, this well,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Chance.
that's the example that I read earlier. So it's on right after chapter 4 begins. For they say nothing comes about from fortune, but that for everything, whatever that we say comes from chance or fortune, there's some definite cause. For example, of coming by fortune into the marketplace. So it's the example at the beginning of chapter 4.
Yeah.
could be just after 196A actually, because my other translation has it near 1, whereas this translation has it near 8. So
Well, David, while you figure that one out, and David, if you send me a message on Meetup now, I can send you the translation now. I have it. Yeah.
Okay, now.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah. The one I was curious about, it says on page 60 in the Sacks, around 30, for they are saying that animals and plants neither are nor come to be by fortune, but that either nature or intellect or some other such thing is the cause. For what comes into being from each seed is not whatever falls out, but from this one an olive tree, from that one a human being, but that the heavens and the most divine of visible things have come from chance. And there is in no way such a cause as there is of animals and plants. So I am very confused about what they mean by chance there, especially when it says that the heavens and the most divine of visible things have come from chance. You know, I agree with what Peter was saying earlier that like chance seems to be the umbrella term and fortune is a subset of it. But I
Wait,
don't.
wasn't he denying that there? He was putting that up as a straw man. He's knocking that over in another sentence. That was he always puts this up and then he goes,
That's right. The paragraph starts with, there are some who make chance responsible for. There
Okay.
are some.
there are some idiots who believe that.
Wait, we're all idiots.
This is the way things are. This itself is work, and it would have been good for someone in this perspective. Well, when it's so strange, and it is stranger still to say, "Oh yeah, that's true. It's true." So then, okay, that perfectly clarifies that then. So I'm trying to see then where we get a better definition of
I
chance.
think
So,
he does actually believe in a hierarchy of an ordering of chance. He believes that living things, plants and animals, um, are ordered, and the heavenly things, the planets and stars and so forth, he thinks they have an origin that comes out of chance. But he thinks that and he probably feels that things like rocks are are kind of obeying laws of basic laws of motion and so forth. But that animals and plants and humans, of course, are following a different, a kind of like a different causality. So I think he does believe in that kind of he is trying, he does kind of draw that kind of line between the things in the heavens. And I don't think he completely repudiates this other idea here. He says, it, it is stranger to see these things when one sees nothing in the heavens happening by chance. Oh, okay. But he says they don't happen by chance. But many things falling out by fortune among the things not assigned to fortune. Yeah. So actually, though it would seem that the opposite, in other words, things would not fall out by fortune among the things not assigned to fortune. Oh boy. There are others to whom it seems that fortune is a cause, but one not disclosed to human understanding.
What page are you on?
I'm on the same chapter, the end of chapter
60.
4. The page 60. And he's just basically saying that we haven't decided yet whether chance and fortune are different, and that's the main question. And to look at these things is not disclosed by human understanding, but raises the divinity question. Are these things caused by divinity and appropriate to a miraculous agency? So he's saying this becomes a theological, to avoid, he wants to now avoid the theological question and inquire into the difference between chance and fortune. So he's basically, that preceding paragraph was throwing the big mess up in the air about how things are. And and these previous speculations. A lot of the physics is like that, I think. Throwing up everything in the air and saying, Miletus said this, and so and so on.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Dave. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, so I think so far what he's doing is setting up his two camps. There are some that says everything comes from fortune, and there are some that says everything comes from chance. And in the beginning of chapter 6, he talks about how those two differ precisely. And in the very first sentence, it's on page 62 in my copy, beginning of chapter 6, first sentence, they differ because chance is more extensive, just as Peter described. For everything from fortune is from chance, but not everything from it is from fortune. For fortune and what comes from fortune are present to beings to whom being fortunate or generally action might belong. For this reason also, fortune is necessarily concerned with actions. And so that's, I think, one of the key ideas here, the difference. Going over into that, just a couple lines down. For this reason, no inanimate thing, nor any animal or small child can do anything as a result of fortune, because they do not have the power to choose in advance. So neither good fortune nor misfortune belong to them except only metaphorically, the difference being action there. And I guess moving into motion, that makes some sense logically.
Thank you, Dave. Peter? I can't hear you, Peter. You're not unmuted.
Okay, sorry. So I just want to just point out, I think so as far as chance, and I mean, Dave found that part I was thinking of as far as the difference between chance and fortune. Fortune is a subspecies of chance, and those are for things that are not, but chance and fortune both are for explaining things that are not always the case. The heavens rotate by laws. The sun always comes up and always goes down. The moon always comes up in its 28-day cycle. Even the planets, even though they wander in the sky, they still wander according to a law. So that's all law-like. So chance or fortune, none can't explain that, because that's always the case. And chance and fortune are never always the case. It's not always I win the lottery or whatever, right? Unfortunately. But then there's the case, then there's this, so if you have one extreme of things that are always the case, and then another extreme where things are almost never the case. That's what chance and fortune try to get at. These things are haphazard, we have no explanation for. And then there's that in the middle part, which is the living things, or actually only our actions, things within nature are for the most part. I mean, we have, we're human, but human doesn't define absolutely every single thing I do, although everything I do is a human action. But, just because I'm human, you don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow, right? If you know the sun is, well, noon will be straight up, and, sunset will be down off to the west. So you know something just by knowing about the sun. So I think it's about how to the frequency or the reliability of the explanation. We have a sort of three things: something that's always the case, something that's almost never the case or just random, and then this sweet spot in the middle for actions.
Yeah, David, by the way, I sent you you should have received the text, David S. So then, I mean, going off what you were saying, Peter, on 62, he says, kind of what you were saying, fortune is unstable, since it is not possible for any of the things from fortune to be always or for the most part. So then it kind of, I mean, is fortune a type of potency? In the sense that, like, the way he uses potency, and let me see, I think this was in the end of, he says on page 55, there is, when he's talking about the causes, he says, let me find where it was. There is the particular or the kind, the incidental or the kind of the incidental thing, and these entangled, this is at the bottom of 55, and these entangled or spoken of simply in all as either at work or in potency. And earlier he says, in all of them, both those meant properly and those incidentally are meant some as potential and others at work. So that was one of the areas I don't know if we got to a few weeks ago, but is fortune then kind of a potential? And I'm thinking about it in light of, and again, I know Heidegger is not the text we're reading here, but there's several of us that have been following along with Heidegger, from Being in Time and through various other works. We just finished a book on Kant and Heidegger, and this was the next book we're reading. So just, is that kind of like saying that that fortune, if it's dependent on a choice, that it's kind of like the marketplace is one thing, but let's think about a different kind of choice. Like, I choose to go to university, and if I hadn't have gone to university, I might have been a vagabond traveling through Central America. Is that kind of what fortune is? That it's a that whenever I make a choice, it opens up a certain range of possibilities. I know there's a randomness in what he's talking about in the marketplace, but it's like almost like if that guy that I run into who's my money lender, like in the back of my mind, there's almost like there is a potential that that jackass who owes me money is going to be in the marketplace because like I see him every Thursday in the marketplace. You know, is that the kind of fortune or randomness that he's talking about? That when you enter a certain situation, there is a limitation on the amount of fortune. Like, because he says that fortune is unstable. So that's why I've like, is he saying that is it unstable in the sense that the fortune is limitless and potential, or that it's limited in a sense because like I would never see a no, you might like I would never see a mountain in the middle of a marketplace, and because I won't see a mountain in the middle of a marketplace, a goat isn't going to run and hit me in the nuts. You know, like I'm wondering like how is he building or how is he foreseeing like the limitations on what fortune encloses? Because if it's limitless, I feel like isn't that what he's getting at with chance as well? So I'm just like pushing back and trying to understand a little bit what the limits are there. So James Cook.
Yeah, I think you just hit it on the head. Thank you. Beginning of chapter 4, is it 4 or chapter 5, I guess. The first two paragraphs there, he hits fortune. Fortune is like a psychological thing. It happens for the sake of something, so it involves a purpose. So so that if something happens by fortune, it's and then chapter 6, I think he mentions that fortune is just a subset of chance. So so the subset of chance, which we call fortune, is always for the sake of something. And of course, things happen for the sake of something because of what? Because of us, because of human intervention. So that's where fortune enters into it, and that clarifies a lot of the text, I think, in chapter 5 and 6.
Thank you, James Cook. David S.
I want to agree with what James is saying. I hope I'm saying something that completely shakes hand with that. It has to do with your ends, your intention, the forsake of, and other things can happen. And you can't bound all the things that can happen. But then again, you can also say there are things that can't happen. So it sounds like I'm putting a bound. Yeah, a mountain's not going to come up in the middle of the mountain place, but I cannot give you a bound on the people you're going to meet, except to say anybody. That's no bound. Okay, so your question makes it look like we can define the bounds, but he says it's indefinite. And the indefiniteness allows things to happen which we're not for the sake of. And if, you know, and so you get fortune, which is not the necessary or usual way things would play out. But you do have that happen, and that's fortune.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like those theories. I don't know what they're called in science, but like it was something in like 20th century, like every choice you make. I feel like they do it in movies all the time. Like every choice you make, you know, opens 17 doors or something. You know, that's kind of how I understand Aristotle talking about fortune.
Life is random and there's purposiveness. You realize after the fact that you're here and happy and that you tried to get in this certain way and yet it wasn't the way you planned it.
Yeah. And I don't want to just stick with David, you know, Dave, feel free to comment on this too, but it's like, isn't that so interesting that whenever you apply purpose to an action, it leaves it open to purposelessness in the sense that like I might have been proposing to drive home from work and then some asshole cuts me off and runs me off the road. You know, it's like that part seems like I think that's what he's getting at when he says it's unstable in the sense that I have a purpose, but it kind of seems like that the world is arbitrary then.
But the last thing, Garth, apply purposiveness to how you look at the world, the universe, the stars, everything happening. And then you have to deal with, well, you know, there's necessary determination to all these things. What's driving it? And then you have to look at, you know, intelligences that aren't yours, right?
Yeah, and he someone brought that up. I think it was Peter about the intelligence part. But Dave, go for it.
I like what you, Sturman, just said, the word necessary, because he builds towards that and says that several times. And there's a tension here between the necessary and the incidental, and fortune being an incidental cause. And so then, purpose, what is purpose? Isn't it seeing something as necessary? And so there's a communication between those concepts too, I feel. So there's another dimension here in the instability, perhaps. I thought no one was saying it, but so I could be off. But I was thinking it was related to the periodicity of it. Like something that is necessary has a periodicity which is, from a scientific viewpoint would be demonstrable over time, like empirical, we might say. And if the fortunate doesn't have the same type of necessary periodicity to it. It doesn't repeat on a necessary basis, even though in the greater scheme of things, you could say that, as a genus or as a category, perhaps, the fortunate repeats, but it doesn't repeat in a necessarily predictable way. So something about the periodicity, I just feel, I wonder. And the bridge between the incidental to the necessary, I feel, is where he is going here. The necessary is very important.
Wouldn't the periodicity argument apply to chance equally, though, David?
Yes, I think,
Yeah.
as he says in the middle of that page 61, that both are among the things for the sake of something. Now, that always throws me. For the sake of something is a term that throws me often, but they both have that same quality. So,
Is
That's
that
the
final
human
cause?
determination. I think this for the sake of something. Only we know this for the sake of.
Isn't that the purposiveness and the end, the idea of having there's an end? There's a final clause.
Well, I think then the next place is to go to 63, where we really start talking about chance, because I think that we've kind of gotten fortune. So the middle of 63, chance though, and I think someone read part of this, but I'm going to read a little bit further. Chance though belongs to the other animals and to many inanimate things. As we say, a horse came along by chance because he was saved by his coming, though he did not come for the sake of being saved. Or a tripod fell down by chance, for it stood there in order to be sat upon, but did not fall down in order to be sat upon. So it is clear, among things happening for the sake of something simply, whenever they happen not for the sake of what turned out, of which the cause was external, we then say they are from chance. And as many of these things that happen by chance as are choices and happen to those having the power of choice are from fortune. Okay, there's many things there that I think need unpacking, but yeah, go for it, Dave. You can get a start.
Yeah, I mean, the river's running over and over, and the rock is eventually, going to be freed and tumble and fall down onto the path below. There's not much chance entailed in that. This is necessary. But the guy walking underneath, his bad fortune, well, his unfortunate bad chance. However, if it's a hunk of gold and it's free and it falls down a foot in front of him and he bends over and picks it up, then it's a fortune. It's a good fortune for him. If it works, that's not really a great example. But if you're saved through incidentals, if you benefit from incidentals, these things have values to intentional beings. So to us, we get a value out of it. And so it has a moral or value component to us as humans, and we call it fortune, good fortune or ill fortune. And the other things, so that's a subset of chance events. Where in chance, if the horse gets sprayed by some rocks, it's not bad fortune. The horse doesn't care. We don't attribute to it that degree of sentience, and it's not a moral issue. It's not so it doesn't matter to us, and it's not a matter of fortune. You know what I'm saying? Although we can look at if it's our animal and we're losing something. So he's really parsing the Greek, the meanings of these words to us, and not so much the causes of the universe, but someone who has to explain these. The physicist has to explain the world to the questioner of why. And what is the significance of this? And say, yeah, that's bad luck for you because you realize, oh, well, that stone got cracked open by that other stone. Isn't that a chance? Not unfortunate, not fortunate. So he's attributing when there are humans, when there's moral, he calls it morals, when there are values involved, it's a matter of fortune. But otherwise, we're talking about chance, which is incidental result of something.
Peter? Don't forget to unmute.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I agree with the point David made at the very end. Remember, this is all in the chance, fortune, by always the case, and usually the case, or whatever, which is always the case, and which is always mostly the case. Those are all ways of answering the question, why did this thing happen? So some things fall into the class of they always happen. The sun comes up, that's law-like, it always happens. The sun always comes up in the morning, always goes down at night. That's something that's always the case. That's not explained by chance. It's not just a random thing happening. Let's say the tripod falling over by, so let's take the stone. We haven't quite got that far, but the stone fell off the mountain or the roof or whatever and killed the guy. That's by chance because the stone doesn't have an agenda. The stone wasn't on its way to the market to, sell itself or something and then accidentally killed this guy, right? That's not there. So it's not by fortune because it's trying to explain why the stone fell. And if a person sits up on the roof and knocks the stone and it slides off the roof and kills the guy, that's by
fortune.
That's not even by fortune. I think that's by an act. This guy that was the intention. This murderer is up there. He said, I'm going to knock the stone off. It's going to hit the guy. It's not a 100% chance.
It's not an incidental cause. It's a direct cause.
There was an act of trying to kill this guy. That's the act. And the stone was just a intermediary means to accomplishing that act. So it's not by chance or by fortune in that case. But the stone just falling for some random reason, since the stone can't have a purpose or an agenda, it can't make a choice. It's by chance that the guy was killed by that stone.
James?
Yeah, I think it was something that you read before this page, or something, or maybe the previous paragraph. But the idea, there's always a choice involved. Yeah, it's the paragraph at the top of page 63. Talks about choice, and it's always when there's always as many of these things that happen, last sentence, as many of these things that happen by chance as our choices, and happen to those having the power of choice, human beings, are from fortune. So, I mean, that's a very narrow definition. He puts it very narrowly there. There's always a choice involved when chance is fortune. So, so it's pretty clear where he's going. We cause fortune. It's a cause. It's a property of human intelligence, essentially.
Okay, so then I want to take us to the bottom paragraph, the first few sentences. Chance is separated most of all from what comes from fortune in things that happen by nature. For whenever something happens contrary to nature, we say that it happened not by fortune, but by chance. I don't understand the second sentence because I feel like the first sentence says the opposite. Because chance is separated most of all from what comes from fortune and things that happen by nature. There is, as he's saying that going to a marketplace and running into the guy that owes you money is by nature. I don't understand what he's saying there by nature and contrary to nature. Yeah, go for it, Peter.
So I think we've now, well, chance is separated most of all from what comes from fortune. He's just saying that we distinguish chance and fortune most of all in things that have a nature. Because nothing, rocks have it's really unclear how much of a nature a rock by itself has. The cosmos as a whole, where earthy things fall down, that's their principal emotion. So a rock will tend to fall down. It's not really the rock in itself that has that nature, but that's a subtle point. But I lost my train of thought now. Sorry.
No, we can come back, James, and then Peter, if you got something, go for it. James?
Yeah, I think to understand this, you kind of have to think of choice and nature as opposites. So things being, we usually think nowadays of things being in nature. So animals, dogs, cats, lions, those are lions and tigers. Those are all nature, and but there is a way of actually kind of distinguishing this, and that is the idea that something is because is happening because of nature. In other words, it is a rock, so it's going to fall. It's going to fall someplace at least, and we know that it's going to follow Newton's laws of physics. So this these actions that things do by nature are what he calls chance. If they are not necessarily if they are incidental, in other words, if they're not predictable, and then when it comes to fortune, those are not the things that happen by nature; those are all caused by human choice. So that's a separation from nature. In other words, things we do, that's what we call artificial. That's what we call that's interfering with nature. That's what Gaia wants to punish us for. The things that we do consciously interfere with nature. These are two separate things. One is nature. One is human action, will, and action. So I don't know the right word for that, but there is a kind of a stunning word.
Peter?
Yeah, I think I got my train of thought back. I'm going to say that I will just be disagreeing with James in this explanation, just FYI. So anyway, so that sentence, for whenever something happens contrary to nature, we say that it happened not by fortune, but by chance. So first of all, what are the things that happen by nature? Only basically plants and animals and the entire cosmos. Those are the three things that have a nature. Living things and the cosmos as a whole, not an individual thing like a rock. Things that happen by nature have an internal principle of motion thing. So we do human-like things. When I eat, that's by nature, because we have to eat to maintain ourselves. The nature of a living thing is to maintain itself in the face of all the stuff that's trying to kill it and everything like that, as well as procreating, making more babies and stuff like that. So if a human does something that can be explained according to nature, then that's taken care of. But when something a human does is not explained by the nature of the human, then it's by chance, not by fortune, because fortune was an intentional action. So there's sort of three things that we usually do, all things that we can explain by nature: eating, seeking shelter, all those sort of things that we know, that's by nature. Things by fortune is when I have an action, when I'm trying to accomplish A, and by chance something randomly accomplishes a different goal I had. That's by fortune, and everything else will be by chance. It will be explained by chance. So
yeah, so going off of that, Peter, I mean, kind of what after James was speaking, I also was going to provide a kind of different way of looking at that. Things that happen by nature, for me, fortune could never be a part of a rock because he clearly defines fortune as being associated with an act and a choice and intentionality. But by nature, even you were bringing it up before, the nature of a solid is that a solid stays together unless it's broken. If it's broken, then the parts of it that were broken still remain as solid. They don't change state. So I feel like in the thinking of a rock will by nature stay a rock. If another rock slams into it and it breaks into a rock, it's still a rock. It's not going to change its nature because of that. But if there's like some massive and I like the rock is going, I think part of the nature is that the solid is not only just going to stay a solid, but the solid is going to stay in place because only a solid that has the possibility for fortune or acting or willing has the potential of movement. And this might be going beyond, but that for me, the rock only is acting contrary to nature if the wind or if rain or if water is cutting away at the bottom of it and eroding the base where it is sitting on and causing it to fall. That seems to me by chance because it's contrary to the nature of the rock. The nature of the rock is not to move and roll down a hill and destroy something, but it's because of something else that it is going against its nature. It's because of something else that, I mean, that might be introducing like incidental cause, which might be fortune. So maybe we can't do that. But like in the sense of the rock, or like even a mountain, think of a mountain. A mountain will be a mountain and do the mountain things that it does. But if there's a fault line underneath it and there's an earthquake and it shatters, then it's going to be destroyed as a mountain. It's going to no longer be this pinnacle that people hike up or whatever. It's going to be something different now. It might be a boulder field. It's going to change in its nature, but it's only because of something that came in that was contrary to the way it was doing. So
And
but
that's consistent with what he's saying, right? And you would describe that as a chance event because it's contrary to the mountain. Peter's
that's
shaking
what I'm
his head
thinking. I think
vigorously
Peter's
now.
disagreeing, but
Go ahead,
that's what I'm thinking.
Peter.
Yeah.
So I think the examples of inanimate things like rocks and mountains is just a particularly bad example because it's a little unclear how much of a nature a rock or a mountain has. But you said that a rock acts. A rock does not act. Only a human acts. Even baby, earlier, I think Dave read that section where it says even babies don't act because a baby can't form enough of a concept to have made a choice between A and B. Acting is only in reference to something that can make a choice and then try and be goal directed towards achieving that choice. So rocks do not act. Just end of story there.
So everything with rocks would be a chance event.
A rock, well, yeah, the rock falling off the roof would be chance.
Externally caused.
Yeah, external cause. The guy pushing the rock, well, now the rock is just a means to the end. It's not the rock didn't decide to move. It's the guy decided to throw the rock at the guy and kill him. That's part of an action. Now we comprehend that under the auspices of an action, but rocks do not in and of themselves act. Mountains do not act. It's also unclear if like an earthquake.
But they don't act, but they have properties. Like you can define their characteristic. And like, for example, a mountain does not flow. A river flows. A mountain does not carve, carry, and deposit. A river does. You can still say inanimate things have a nature. Because you have to define it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to define it.
A nature is a principle of motion and rest. And that's why they said that inanimate things are difficult because it's only within the context of the entire cosmos that roughly the principle of motion of rocks and things, earthy things is to go down. And fiery things go up. I mean, and the heavenly things, they are rigorous. They rotate in the sky or whatever, go in circles or whatever you want to call that.
Aren't you two saying the same thing? What is the point of difference between you two? A rock, if it has no internal motion or action or volitional action, most of the events occurring around a rock are going to be by chance, right? We could,
Yes, I would agree with that.
yeah.
Okay. James Cook?
Yeah, did you say, Peter, did you say, you can shake your head, did you say that a principle, a nature is a principle of motion and rest? Yeah, so I think that's self-contradictory. You're being self-contradictory.
Well, Aristotle is.
Well, maybe, but there are some things he says that are kind of strange about the heavenly bodies and the animals and plants, right? Have as kind of like areas, but if we look at the Earth, if we look at a rock as a component of the Earth, right? So if we look at it from a kind of like a modern point of view, we know that the Earth is just a heavenly body, right? We're just like moving on a spinning ball. So, and everybody knows that now. So the and you said something like rocks don't act, but rocks do move, right? So if rocks
Well,
move,
a rock does not. Well, a rock will.
I
tend
heard
to
your
go down.
explanations. I heard all your explanations. I think if rocks move, then they and if those movements are not actions, right? You know, and you said, well, what about an avalanche or something like that, or an earthquake? The thing is that if I like Garth's explanation very well, because very much, because if you have a rock and it's going to and it's undermined for some reason, and now it has to follow the gravity of the earth, it has a larger rock underneath it, in other words, as we know. So it has to follow the gravity of the rock, and it's going to move, and it's going to seem to move by itself to a lower place and be that avalanche. So the rocks do move, and they move from one place to another, and actually Aristotle explains that in a different book. So I think motion comes later in chapter 4 or 5 or something.
But it's an external principle. It's not an internal principle.
Book 4 or
I mean,
5. External.
Yeah.
Well, that's not external, because it's actually
Well, the
being
reason it moved is
undermined by nature. See, that's the thing, is if we take this kind of like fixed view of nature, the nature of things like rocks, the nature of the earth, like a something foreign, something external to a rock. No, the earth is a rock. We know that. So it's kind of like yeah, we're kind of like, we have to sort of like be dogmatic about Aristotle, just like we could be dogmatic about Marx, we could be dogmatic about Hegel, we could be dogmatic about Heidegger, we could, you know, any particular set of ideas we can develop into a dogma.
So is the
So we
problem,
have to read everything critically and say, well, what does he mean that can be applied to this matter? And the matter of a rock is that it does have movement. And if we say, well, a rock can't act, only humans act, what is that? I mean, you're saying that a horse can't act if it gallops away from us when we scare it? It's like these and does Aristotle actually say that? And we have to follow him down the hill, and you know, we have to follow him into
to understand what he's saying, we have to follow him, but we don't have to believe him.
Yeah, I don't think we have to follow him at all. So
the thing is,
we read this stuff and we find out where it applies, and if there's something that makes sense, because a lot of this makes sense. The difference between chance and fortune. I mean, it's a beautiful explanation, and the idea of things that happening by chance, being according to nature. We don't have to use a dogmatic approach to nature in order for that to be true. We can sort of say things happen by chance in nature, and how do they happen by chance in nature, as opposed to things happening by fortune, or the subset of things that happen incidentally that we can say, according to Aristotle, happen by fortune. So he's making so much sense here. So it's like I'm just sort of like, let's not ruin it, by insisting on a dogmatic approach to the entire to the entire body of the entire
Which is
canon.
your dogma, not mine.
My
Understood.
dogma? No,
Yeah,
I don't feel it's
I
a dog. I
think
don't feel it's my dogma. I think that we have to take every idea and apply it to the substance in the sentence and paragraphs, in the context of the sentence and paragraph where he's saying it. We don't apply the
yeah,
whole canon.
David, I think what we
Similar
need to talk about
project.
is what we need to talk about is motion. So in chapter 7, he brings up motion because I think that comes into play with all these things. He says on 64, and this is the part that I was really kind of curious about, that the causes then are these, and this many is clear. And since there are 4 causes, it belongs to the one who studies nature to know about all of them. And he will supply what is due in the way of natural inquiry by tracing back the why to them all. The material, the form, the mover, and that for the sake of which. But often 3 of them turn back into 1. For the what it is and that for the sake of which are 1. At that whence the motion first is the same in form with these. For a human being brings forth a human being, and, in general, as many things as, being moved themselves, cause motion, are the same in form with the things moved. So I think there's, a lot of things going on here. The one thing that was the first thing that I really didn't understand is how he starts off by saying there are 4 causes, but then he says, but actually 3 of them kind of fold into the 1. And if we recall from the beginning of the physics, he gave arguments against why all is 1 is not a way of looking at the cosmos. So I'm understanding how we're now understanding the causes in the sense that he is giving explanations of how actually this is part of this cause, and actually this is part of this cause, and which is the one cause then that he's saying they're all falling back into. Yeah, go for it, Peter.
Oh, my hand down.
I just point out that.
Oh yeah, I put it down. Sorry, David. I'll go to you after Peter. Peter?
So but it's not that those 3 always collapse. He says often 3 of them turn back into 1. And so the thing is, what situations or what makes it so that some of these 3 things go together? And that's for the case of the living things, for the form of the living thing, the nature of a living thing. Because he's going to somewhere, he has that really awkward thing I can never really quite remember, but the work of being active, staying yourself. That is sort of the form. That's the form of a living thing. That combines the material, the formal, and the telos all into one underlying principle. That's where the 3 things come together. Rocks wouldn't have, inanimate things don't have this 3-in-1 kind of thing. Only living things would have it. I think at least that's my understanding.
Okay, David?
These can coincide when there is intention, because the what of a cup is the form. It is a cup because it has the form, and the form is entailed in what it does, what it can do. So, it is formed to a form because of the end. So the reason it is caused to be this shape is because it's a cup. So the cause of the form is the end of it, which is to be used as a cup. So these things have collapsed because the intention for it had made those the same.
Well, but then how would you be able to say that the idea that all is 1 is not true then? Because if you say that there is an intentionality, that there's a divine being that creates the world, then wouldn't all causes just be like linked in a chain to a first mover? And you could say that all is just 1. I mean, if you're talking about all is 1 in like a static sense, like at all points of time, in all of history, everything is part of this unity.
But you have to explain. Your job is to explain as a physicist how this works. And there are connections between things that occur. And you can point to the efficient and cause of something in the world. So you can't just explain it by saying, well, there was a single cause at the beginning and everything is the result. That's no explanation. It doesn't give an answer. It doesn't fulfill the why. It doesn't mean anything to give that answer, right? You haven't explained a particular form. You haven't explained any particular.
Charles?
So I wanted to also just say that I think James Cook and Peter are entailed in, sounds like arguing, actually trying to accomplish the same thing, which is to say, what's the broadest context I can take the term nature in and read this whole book with that concept as I carry it? Well, in this section, it seems to be talking about the intrinsic behavior of the thing with its internalness, but then there's external stuff that acts on it. That's not the nature, but it's the nature of the complex. So, you know, the rock, its nature is not to move, but it can move because of an external force, and now its nature is to rest downwards. Okay, so it does obtain unessential attributes because of external relations, but that's its nature is not to move, but it can be moved.
Yeah. So the cause then is completely contingent on relationships.
And in that
It's
case,
an interaction.
the human being, the cause is internal. So, you know, and animals create motion. So animals have that degree of causality, but they don't create like with intention. They just respond. They're clocks.
Mm-hmm. Go for it, Charles.
I was just going to make a comment on identifying the three causes as one. And one thing that might help is that if we remember that Aristotle has already stated that you can't have, for example, matter without form. And the form is actually that part of I'm not sure what the term is that Sachs uses, but yeah, the form is that which really makes a thing to be what it is, and once the thing grows into its full maturity, that which makes it to be what it is actually also its final cause. It's the thing for the sake of. Those two things are actually the same. So in talking about these different four causes, you're just talking about them mentally as moments that you can think of to see how things are made up, rather than talking about them actually of how they actually are, because none can be without the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like coming across an alien object and not knowing what the hell it's for.
Yes, yeah, in a way, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Go for it, Peter.
So I just want to go back and get back to the text and reread that sentence, and then go past the semicolon, because that's where he gives the example of why the three are one, right? The three causes are really the same thing. And I'll just say that examples are important. He does not use the example of a rock. He does not use the example of an artifact like a cup. He uses the example of a living thing, a human being. So that, I think that's crucial, because those three things are very different. But often three of them turn back into one, or the what it is, and that for the sake of which are one. So what would that mean? That's the what it is, the essence of something, and the for the sake of which an action, something is happening. When do those things coincide? Those things certainly coincide in living things, because because a living thing is an internal principle of emotion, and it's to preserve itself. Part of my essence is to preserve myself as a living thing. A bed doesn't preserve itself. It's an artifact. If something falls on a bed, it just stays broken, right? It doesn't go off and spontaneously fix itself. If I get a cut, I heal. I get hungry, I go off and find food. The for the sake of which is me, and the what it is for me to maintain my sense, those one are the same. And then it goes on, and what, and that whence the motion first is the same in form with these. The origin, or in a living thing, the origin, the efficient cause is what we, it's come to, the origin is again that same thing. The form, the nature, the form of a living thing is that which stays busy, maintaining itself, being itself, maintaining itself. That he says that somewhere. I just don't have that handy right here.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's get to the example. For a human being brings forth a human being, and in general, as many things as being moved themselves. Rocks don't move. Well, rocks go down, but they tend not to move them. So they don't spontaneously get up and move. They have to be undermined. There has to be an earthquake or something like that. Cause motion and are the same in form with the things moved. The thing moving and the thing that is moved by a living thing. I am the thing that moves myself. So I'm both the thing that moves and the thing that is moved. A rock doesn't move itself in a sense, really. It's pushed or jostled by an earthquake or something like that. But it has a nature to fall down. But it's not in of itself a source of the motion. Rocks don't spontaneously move. They are acted upon by another rock hits it and it rolls. Yeah, that's fine. And it'll tend to go down. It won't tend to go up, etc.
Go for it, James Cook. I might take us elsewhere.
I hate to interrupt you, but I'm dying because I'm dying to hear what you're going to say. One of these is the telos. I think the forsake of which, and the thing, the for the sake of. That's the final. That's the purpose, right? The end. The end cause. The end purpose. The end. The cause of the end, and the cause of the result, and he's just drawing all these are this whole section is to try to draw all of these together and say that all of these four causes, which have been spoken of in the past, because he's always referencing he's always concerned about what has been the discussion up to now, is that all of these causes are tied together. The material is caused. The material is involved in the cause of the motion, the efficient causes, as David said. The form and the material are interrelated, so he's basically pushing the three into one, trying to basically saying that the causes are interrelated.
Let's go to Charles. I've really gotten stuck on David S's use of the word relationship. But so I might take us elsewhere. So Charles, why don't you go?
My translation makes it clear that the idea of motion here, what is really moving the entire process of keeping a thing together that Peter was talking about, is the final cause. The final cause is really very active. It's something that you could think of it in terms of something that draws the entire process to its full conclusion, and that it has an effect. The effect of the final cause is that everything gets full grown, or everything gets put into place. And so that's kind of the idea of the motion here.
I might be taking us elsewhere, but I'm trying to understand, because the one thing that was really in and this is in book 2 on the causes that has still stuck with me, and I'm glad that Greg put something in the event chat about the speech act. And I'm really trying to understand if if the final and the form, so just going back to page 51, and I know Peter and I had some disagreements about this, but for what is potentially flesh or bone does not yet have its own nature until it takes on the look that is disclosed in speech, that by the means of which we define when we say what flesh or bone is. And not until then is it by nature. And I am wondering if, I mean, again, I'm thinking a lot about Heidegger, if this might not be in being in time the way Heidegger is understanding ready to hand and present at hand, in the sense that a cup is present at hand, that the form and the material, and there might be a commentary on Aristotle that actually the telos and the form are not actually one until it becomes something ready to hand. So until I actually use the cup for what I defined it is for, the form and the material live in some present at hand way, and something that is not it's not connected to the actual thing. Because I really felt like, and I don't even know if maybe Aristotle, I tend to want to agree with Peter that Aristotle probably did not mean this, but he does say that you need to define the thing in order for us to know what it is. And I am going back to saying that there isn't a material and a formal and a teleological. They're not all tied together until the human acts on it. That's what I'm kind of proposing. That until there is intention put on it, that those things might not actually be together. It just might be. I'm just wondering, because like the difference between present to hand and ready to hand is that ready to hand is when I use it for the final cause, whereas present to hand is like it's in the environment, but I'm not putting intentionality. I'm not giving it the final cause by using it. It's just proposing. Because I still think it's very odd to me to think that if all things if the things have some type of cause that are connected to it, and then to say that all the causes can be boiled down at some point into one, it does seem to, like, I don't understand why you can't say all is one. Because all is one is saying that these are all in a relationship with each other that is under this greater branch of whether it's the cosmos or the heavens or whatever it is. But saying all is one, that's kind of what I felt it meant, that these all fall into relationships that connect to each other and that have effects on each other because they're connected. There cannot be causes between things unless they're already a priori connected. So Peter, and then we can go to David.
Yeah, I'll just say again that I think those three causes coming into one only happens in the case of like living things. So it's not a general rule for everything. Well, it's only in the certain cases. But going back to bottom page 50, top of page 51, which is 193b for anybody else that cares. I think it's just a grammatically, I mean, I thought about this over the last couple of weeks because you had brought it up earlier in the previous thing about what is this account and this define or this look we have in speech. How does that relate? And I think you just grammatically misread the sentence. So for what is potentially flesh or bone does not yet have its own nature, and is not, and I'm going to leave out the middle part, and it says, and not until then is it by nature. Something is only by nature if I think that the fact that we have something by speech means we have some sort of concept of it. And that's how we can identify that something has a nature, but it's not the thing that causes the nature. It's just that that's how we recognize that something has a nature. So there's not it's not like our thought is a thing that causes these natures. It's a complicated sentence, and there's so many.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's the speech act that he's saying gives it the nature.
No, it says until that which is flesh and so what is potentially flesh or bone? That would be something like our food, right? It's not yet flesh and bone. We eat it. It could become flesh and bone, right? That's what I take. Do we agree at least on that little bit?
I mean, I thought he was using flesh or bone in more of a like a symbolic way, thinking that for what is but
It's for what is potentially flesh or bone. It's not yet flesh or bone.
yeah.
It's potentially. So what is an example of something that could be flesh or bone? My clam
Animal?
chowder.
Yeah, okay.
Before I eat it, right?
Yeah.
If I eat the clam chowder, eventually becomes flesh and bone.
Hmm.
So in potential, it has the flesh or bone. So for what is potentially flesh or bone does not yet have its own nature. So the clam chowder doesn't have its own nature. It's not flesh and bone yet. Until it takes on the look. What kind of a look? The look that we would say, oh, that thing has a nature. That's the way I'm reading that thing. So in this other way, the nature would be of the things having in themselves a source of motion, the form or look, which is not separate other than in speech. Only in speech can we separate things out. I can separate out the shape of a coffee cup from an actual coffee cup, but I can't do it in actuality. I can't just pull the shape out of the coffee cup and say, hey, here's the shape. And we all look at the shape. In my thought, I can consider only the shape. But in reality, there's every physical thing has some shape or other, right? It's only separable in the mind.
Okay. David S.
I wonder if we're answering harder questions than Aristotle is actually grasping.
Oh, 100%.
Because that stone on the ground with a hole in it and the big, heavy stick lying next to it are not a wheel and an axle. They're potentially a wheel and an axle. And the question of that transition, you could say there's permanently that form of wheel and axle that they're participating, in, but not until they're together. But we're talking about this sort of Hegelian examination of the relation of the whole and the parts. The thing is not a whole until it has parts, and these aren't parts of it until there's a whole. So it has to come together as, individual moments and, a kind of a union. So I don't know that he's going much beyond that. And the question of, is it there sitting there? The question is, I think, simpler than that. You're a physicist, and on your exam, we're going to ask you, or someone's going to ask you, how did this happen? And you're going to have to answer how it works by putting the parts together to get the whole. But it's not that the parts are intrinsically the parts without this concept of the whole, right? So then you can say the cause of them being together is a final cause, which entails an axle and a wheel for transportation, But that worrying about that conceptual level is being prepared to be an answer to the question why and comprehending the universe. So this is about, what is your comprehension about, in a sense. He's not asking you what is. He's saying, what is your comprehension of what is? Because I don't think you can answer what is, in any other way and say, can you answer me these why questions? And what's the form of answering these why questions? Not that there's something true beyond what you're going to think and make a why and an answer. This is like the way you put it together. So I don't think he's talking about existence devoid of consciousness, of human beings, the forms without thinking and the material without it's about how, maybe you could say, this is the logos, are engaging in how we will discuss, think, and describe these things. So I think it's fair to say this is a language and thought examination, not just a question of what exists and what are causing things amongst themselves without us. We're engaged in this. And then the Heideggerian question is a little more, sensitive to how things transform and become ready to hand. And what that is now in the universe, the world that it's present to hand means everything is transformed by the readiness. And, having grasped the hammer, things are now hittable in a way of your direct intention, and stuff happens without your having a hammer, because it's gone now. And that's what it is, that it's ready to hand. It's changed what is in the world. So it's opened up a new whole aspect of being. And I don't think Aristotle is really talking about that necessarily. That's the phenomenologist getting to the sanding each layer off of how these transformations. How do we see this as a cause? Why did that happen? What moment? Different examination.
Thank you, David. James?
Yeah, thank you, David. I think you're right there. It's kind of this is a physics. It's not a kind of like an ontological investigation in the style of Heidegger. But the form, what he's talking about in this passage, I think, is the form. The next paragraph, or it's in this paragraph too. It's the form or look. So, in other words, once we actually use words, once we define the thing that is the cause of motion, the motion, what is the motion of a thing in nature, then that defines it as nature to us. That defines its nature to us, and being able to talk about it and so forth. And it's more nature, he says in the next sentence, and this form or look is nature more than the material is. And the material would be like the substance or the being. So each thing is meant what each or the yeah. So that's and in the form of work more than it is what it is potentially. Well, what's the form of work of something? In the case of a rock, it can hit another rock. It can move another rock. It can be a cause. It can be it has many purposes. Rocks have many purposes, not just not just the purpose not to act. So it's the form. It's, in other words, this is about how humans create form, and that form defines the nature of something.
Thank you, James. Steve, last comment.
I'm glad we came back to this. I think it's absolutely profound. In a way, it predates a lot of what we could call quantum physics, because in quantum physics, the observer is absolutely necessary for the manufacture of reality. And it's at that point that everything that exists in potentia collapses and can be observed and then becomes discrete or actual. And here, in a way, I do believe that you can see this as putting the observer back in a primary form, because the way that this starts, as we just pointed out, many of us, is that talking about nature, the first way we can talk about it is the material. Okay, so the clam chowder, right, or the thing that is potentially flesh or bone, has the material of clam or fish and cream and hopefully some spices and herbs. And so only when it takes on the look that is disclosed in speech, the aspect is what comes to my mind. Only when it takes on the aspect of clam chowder. The aspect is that which we define it as clam chowder. Until the observer becomes involved in collapsing the potentia of whatever this matter is, then it takes on this aspect or the look as defined by speech. And then, as he goes on to say, and as James just pointed out, that the form or look, again, the look, the aspect, is nature more than the material is. So that's very interesting that he is giving that primacy. And I do read that in a phenomenological sense. I think you could certainly read it like that.
Cool. That was the last comment, unless you have something real quick, Ginny.
Yeah, very quick. Dave, you're making me hungry. I just want to say, I don't know if you're interested, but ladies and gentlemen, Trump is indicted. It be for me. I hope we all in this room are in agreement.
True to form.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, folks. So next week we are not. Hold on. Let me do this. Next week